I think I want to date other men. She said it just like that. No warning. No tears. Just a calm, matter-of-fact tone like she was telling me we were out of milk. The room fell silent, but inside me, it was a full-blown hurricane. I remember setting down my fork, hearing the soft clink of metal on porcelain. The spaghetti I'd made was still steaming. Garlic bread untouched. I'd lit candles, hell, I even bought her favorite red wine. It was supposed to be a nice dinner. But she had other plans. Rachel didn't look up from her plate when she said it. Her eyes stayed focused on her food, like if she didn't make eye contact, it wouldn't sting as much. I've been thinking a lot, she added. I just feel like I need to explore. To find myself again. I stared at her like I was looking at a stranger. We'd been married 10 years. 10. Through layoffs, promotions, her mother's cancer, my dad's heart surgery. Through empty bank accounts and nights we fell asleep holding hands because we were too exhausted to speak. She had been my world. And now, she wanted out. But not entirely. No, she didn't say I want a divorce. She said she wanted to date other men. While married to me. And just like that, my entire life was flipped upside down. In that moment, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my plate or slam the table like some dramatic movie scene. I just looked at the woman I thought I knew and realized I didn't know her at all. Thank you for watching this far. If this story hit you somewhere deep, drop a 1 in the comments, I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel with someone who needs to hear that loyalty isn't weakness, it's power when given to the right person. They met at a friend's New Year's Eve party in Chicago, long before either of them had built the polished, put-together lives people would come to admire. Justin was standing near the window, drink in hand, scanning the skyline like he belonged somewhere else. Rachel walked right up to him and asked if he was avoiding small talk or just pretending to be mysterious. He smiled, told her it was a little of both, and they spent the rest of the night talking like they'd known each other for years. It wasn't instant fireworks, not the kind movies exaggerate, it was quieter, steadier, like something real that just knew how to last. At the time, he was finishing a master's degree in information security and working part-time at a startup that paid him in stock options and vending machine snacks. Rachel had just started her new role as a junior accountant at a mid-sized tech firm, already showing signs she'd climb fast. They bonded over dry humor, a shared love of documentaries, and the fact that both of them had grown up with parents who worked too much and said too little. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. As the years passed, Justin moved into cybersecurity, eventually landing a stable position at a respected firm. He wasn't flashy, but he was damn good at what he did. Rachel, on the other hand, was all drive and polish. She rose through the ranks, switching companies twice and earning a reputation as someone who didn't just balance the books, she cleaned house. By the time they'd been married 5 years, she was a corporate controller managing multimillion-dollar budgets, and their dual incomes meant they could finally afford the kind of life they used to daydream about, a downtown condo with a view, regular vacations, wine with labels they could pronounce. To everyone around them, they were the dream couple. Smart, successful, good-looking in that they could do a magazine spread in Pottery Barn kind of way. Friends envied their balance. Family beamed with pride. On social media, their life looked effortless, 2 professionals building an empire, traveling, smiling, thriving. No one saw the cracks. Not yet. It started subtly, the kind of shift you don't notice at first because you don't want to. Rachel began working late more often, blaming quarter-end audits and new systems going live. At first, Justin didn't think much of it. He understood high-pressure cycles, knew what it was like to lose track of time and lines of code and deadlines. But then the late nights became regular, then habitual, and she stopped texting to say she'd be late. Her tone changed too, sharper, more distracted, like every question he asked was an interruption. She started dressing differently, not drastically, just enough that he noticed. New blouses, tighter fits, perfume she hadn't worn since they were dating. She'd always looked good, but now it was polished in a way that felt intentional. Justin chalked it up to her position, maybe a new image for work. That's what he told himself. But when she started sleeping with her phone face down and keeping her laptop closed when he walked into the room, something in his gut started to hum. The conversations at home grew shallow. Dinner turned into quiet chewing with background noise. They didn't laugh as much. They didn't touch as much. When he'd lean in, she'd flinch, just slightly, like she wasn't expecting it. He asked if everything was okay, and she'd sigh and say she was just tired, that he was overthinking. So he let it go. For a while, he told himself it was a phase. Stress. Maybe even early burnout. He bought flowers. Booked a weekend getaway. She smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. He tried to ignore the fact that she was suddenly guarding her phone like it held nuclear codes or that she always seemed to be texting someone, even in bed. He didn't want to believe it. That was the honest truth. Even as his instincts sharpened by years in cybersecurity, screamed that something was off, his heart begged for another explanation. He reminded himself that this was Rachel. His Rachel. The woman who used to fall asleep on his shoulder during movie nights and hum in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. He told himself he was being paranoid. He held on to denial like a lifeline, not because he was blind, but because he was afraid of what he'd see if he opened his eyes. The night she finally said it, the air felt heavy before a word was spoken. Justin had cooked, nothing extravagant, just grilled salmon, a bottle of Chardonnay, and her favorite roasted rosemary potatoes. He lit a candle in the center of the table more out of habit than romance at that point, and as Rachel sat down, she didn't comment on the meal or smile like she used to. She seemed distant, eyes darting toward her phone every few minutes, fingers lightly drumming on the stem of her glass. They barely spoke during the first few bites. Justin asked how her day was, she said fine. He asked about the upcoming board presentation, she shrugged. Then she set her fork down slowly and looked up at him with a strange mix of detachment and hesitation. I've been feeling off lately, she said carefully, choosing each word like it might explode. Like I don't know who I am anymore. Justin didn't speak. He didn't trust himself to yet. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she continued, eyes lowering to the plate. I need space. Time to figure myself out. He watched her for a moment, barely blinking. His pulse pounded in his ears. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms slowly, keeping his voice steady. Rachel, he said, is this about someone else? Her expression flickered, just for a second. A flash of something, guilt? Panic? Then it was gone. No, she answered too quickly, too flatly. It's not about anyone. I just feel stuck. Like I've been living the same version of myself for years, and I don't know if that's who I want to be anymore. Justin let the silence stretch between them. He looked at her like he was trying to see through her, to find the woman he married buried somewhere behind the polished surface in vague words. You want space, he repeated, more to himself than to her. She nodded. And I think I might want to date other people. I'm not saying divorce. I just need clarity. The table felt miles wide in that moment. Justin picked up his wine glass, sipped, and set it down with care. You mean, he said slowly, you want to sleep with someone else while staying married to me? Rachel's silence said more than any answer could. Rachel hesitated, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass like she needed something to anchor herself. There is someone I've been talking to, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. His name is Aaron. He started at the company a few months ago. We're in the same division, so we work together a lot. She paused, glanced up, then looked away again. It's not physical. We've never done anything. We've just talked. A lot. Maybe too much. Justin didn't interrupt. He sat perfectly still, his face unreadable, the stone beginning to swirl quietly behind his eyes. I didn't plan for it to happen, she said quickly, sensing his restraint. It just did. He listens. He notices things about me. We connect. That's all it is, just connection. You connect with me, Justin said evenly. Or you used to. Rachel's lip quivered slightly, and she looked down, silent. So let me get this straight, he continued, his voice calm but cold. You've developed feelings for another man. You're emotionally attached. You haven't crossed a physical line yet, allegedly, and you want to keep our marriage intact while you explore this connection? She nodded slowly, eyes full of something between shame and confusion. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just need to understand what this is. Who I am. I still love you, Justin. I really do. But part of me feels pulled toward him, and I can't ignore it. I just need some time to figure it out. He studied her face for a long, quiet moment, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Okay, he said softly. If I told you I'd been talking to another woman for months, sharing intimate thoughts, having long conversations, laughing at messages you never saw, and I told you I wanted to explore that connection while staying married to you, would you be okay with that? Rachel didn't answer. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Her eyes filled with panic, realization, maybe even regret. But it was too late. The truth had already escaped her mouth, and now it hung in the air between them like a live wire. Justin pushed back his chair, stood up slowly, and walked out of the room, leaving his half-finished dinner to go cold beside hers. Rachel didn't say anything for a long time after his question, but her face said enough. The hesitation, the tightening in her jaw, the faint flicker of offense in her eyes, it was clear. She wouldn't be okay with it. Not if the roles were reversed. Not if Justin had found someone else to talk to, someone who made him feel seen, someone he was emotionally drawn to. She would have called it cheating. She would have called it betrayal. But for her, it was self-discovery. For her, it was justified. That double standard hit Justin harder than anything else. It wasn't just the confession or the casual cruelty of how she delivered it, it was the hypocrisy of wanting him to stand still while she explored the idea of someone else. It was the expectation that he'd wait, patiently and loyally, while she decided if their marriage was still worth it. He didn't yell. He didn't call her names. He didn't slam a door or throw a glass or demand answers she'd never give honestly. He just stood in the hallway for a moment after leaving the dining room, his hand on the banister, and breathed. It was the kind of breath you take right before stepping into a fire. Then he turned, walked up the stairs, and began packing a small overnight bag. Not much, just a few days' worth of clothes, his laptop, toiletries, his backup hard drive, and the old burner phone he hadn't touched in over a year. He didn't even bother trying to explain. As he zipped the bag, Rachel appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, uncertainty flickering behind her eyes. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice low. "To give you your space," he replied without turning around. "You said you needed time to figure things out. I'm giving it to you." That night, he checked into a modest hotel on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy. Quiet. Anonymous. The kind of place you go when you don't want to be found. He didn't turn on the TV. Didn't scroll through social media. He just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wallpaper, heart pounding in his chest, not from sadness, but from a sudden, cold clarity. He was done waiting for her to come to her senses. Done hoping this was just some emotional detour. Rachel had made a choice, even if she wouldn't say it out loud. And now it was time for him to make his own. He pulled out his laptop and connected to his encrypted cloud server. Then he opened the remote access protocol for the home network, one he'd quietly installed months ago when he first noticed the late nights and the phone turned face down. As a cybersecurity analyst, it wasn't hard. Their home system, the Wi-Fi, even her work laptop, all set up by him. She never changed the admin passwords. Never bothered to check the back doors he left open. Over the next few hours, Justin combed through Rachel's emails, her chat logs, her cloud-stored messages, even the metadata on the photos she'd sent and received. He didn't do it out of spite. Not yet. He needed to know the truth, not the half-baked version she fed him over dinner, but the full, unfiltered story. And what he found changed everything. The moment the system unlocked and her sync devices began to load, Justin felt a chill settle in his chest. This wasn't about paranoia anymore, this was confirmation. The first thing he noticed were the message threads with Aaron. They weren't labeled under his real name, of course. Rachel had saved him as Nora, HR in her contacts, likely to throw off suspicion. Clever, but not clever enough. The texts started off harmless, even boring. A few work-related updates, then subtle flirting, emojis, inside jokes, compliments about her outfits. Harmless on the surface. But as he kept scrolling, the tone shifted. Rapidly. There were late-night messages that dripped with tension. "Can't stop thinking about that conversation we had in the break room," Aaron wrote in one. "Your laugh's been stuck in my head all night." Another message read, "You know, if I had my way, I'd take you out of that office dress and make you forget your husband exists." Rachel didn't shut him down. She didn't protest. She flirted back. Hard. Her replies were teasing, filled with winks, suggestive jokes, moments of vulnerability. She told him things she used to tell Justin, how stressed she was, how unseen she felt at home, how good it felt to be around someone who paid attention. He clicked into her email next and found confirmation receipts for 2 separate hotel stays. One on a Tuesday night 3 weeks ago, the other on a Friday when she claimed she had a company off-site. Both reserved under Rachel's name. Both local. Both at a hotel 10 minutes from their condo. He cross-referenced the timestamps with the text messages and saw it all unfold, planning the meetups, sharing room numbers, sending playful countdowns. There was no room left for benefit of the doubt. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was physical. It had been physical for a while. Justin's eyes remained fixed on the screen, but he felt detached, as if his body had gone numb to protect itself from the flood of betrayal. The silence in the room was deafening. Not even the soft hum of the heater could drown out the weight pressing on his chest. He had hoped, desperately, foolishly, that it wasn't this bad. But now, staring at the proof, all he could think was how easily she had looked him in the eye and said she needed space. While she was already giving herself to someone else. As he kept digging, the pieces began to rearrange themselves, forming a timeline Rachel had never intended him to see. The affair hadn't started recently, as she had implied. It had been going on for months, 5, maybe 6, depending on how far back he traced the messages and appointments disguised as client meetings. She had been lying long before that dinner table confession. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the fact that she had let him believe he was crazy for sensing something was wrong. Every time he questioned her distance, every time he reached out with concern, she'd smiled and said, "You're just imagining things, babe." Then came the moment that gutted him. It was his birthday back in February. She'd made plans to take him out to his favorite restaurant, even had a reservation. But 3 hours before dinner, she called and said there was a last-minute work emergency. She sounded annoyed, apologetic, too flustered for him to push back. He told her it was okay. He ordered takeout and sat alone in their living room, watching an old movie and trying not to feel forgotten. That night, he told himself she was just overwhelmed, maybe even on the verge of burnout. He had no idea she was at the Westmont Hotel with Aaron, the same hotel that showed up again in her inbox. He found the receipt, same day, same time, a double room. She hadn't even waited until the weekend. She skipped his birthday to sleep with another man. Justin sat back in the hotel chair, staring blankly at the glow of the screen. His hands were steady, but inside, something broke in a way that didn't make a sound. No outburst, no slammed fists. Just a deep, hollow quiet that stretched across his chest like frost. This wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't miscommunication or emotional drift. It was deliberate, it was cold, and it was layered in deceit. Rachel hadn't just made a mistake, she'd built a parallel life, and she'd done it behind his back while keeping up just enough of the act to keep him anchored in place. As he closed the laptop, Justin felt something click inside him. Not rage, not even grief, just purpose. The woman he loved was gone, replaced by someone who had lied to his face and expected him to wait patiently for her to decide if he still mattered. But now, it was his turn to decide what came next. The next discovery came by accident, a line item tucked into a spreadsheet Rachel had synced to her cloud drive. Justin almost missed it, but something about the label tax reserve, Q3, didn't sit right. It was a shared financial document she used for tracking joint expenses and investments, but this entry wasn't familiar. He clicked on it and followed the attached links, landing on a banking portal he hadn't seen before. The account was under Rachel's name, but what really caught his eye was the beneficiary listed beside it, Aaron Chase. His name, there in black and white, right next to a balance of just over $70,000. Transfers from their joint savings account had been split over the last 4 months, each labeled innocently, estimated taxes, emergency fund, travel budget. All things Rachel had always managed with little input from him because she was better with numbers. He trusted her. She used that trust to funnel their shared money into an escape fund. Digging deeper, he found email drafts and message archives where she and Aaron had been exchanging links to real estate listings. Condos in downtown Denver, sleek and modern, with rooftop views and open-concept kitchens. Some emails included little comments from Rachel, "I could see us having Sunday mornings here," or "Imagine walking to the gym from this spot." In one draft, never sent but fully written, she told Aaron she planned to talk to Justin in a few weeks and start the separation process. She was only waiting for the annual bonuses to clear. She had a plan, a timeline, even a cover story. It wasn't a maybe anymore. She wasn't confused. She was preparing to leave. Justin leaned back from the screen, blinking slowly. He wasn't even angry in that moment. Not yet. What he felt was a quiet unraveling of everything he believed about their life. The nights they spent planning vacations, the shared jokes, the whispered conversations before bed, it had all become noise. He thought back to a few weeks ago, when she had leaned her head on his shoulder while they watched a documentary, told him she missed their movie nights. That same week, she'd toured a 2-bedroom condo with Aaron and signed a pre-approval form. The duality of it made his stomach turn. Rachel hadn't just been dishonest. She had been strategic, careful, methodical. And somehow, she still had the nerve to look him in the eye and say she didn't know what she wanted. But now, Justin knew. She wanted out. And she didn't want to get her hands dirty doing it. By the time the sun started bleeding through the thin hotel curtains, Justin hadn't slept. He sat hunched on the edge of the bed, the software of his laptop now silent, the weight of everything he had uncovered pressing into his chest like a cinder block. His fingers were trembling, not from shock anymore, but from something deeper, fatigue, maybe, or the quiet horror of watching the life he built come undone piece by piece. He stood slowly, stretched the stiffness from his limbs, and crossed the room to his overnight bag. Tucked into the front pouch was something he hadn't meant to bring, a small leather wallet that held his backup IDs, a spare credit card, and a photo. It slipped out as he reached for his phone, landing face up on the desk beside him. Their wedding photo. The real one, not the filtered version people saw on social media. Just the two of them, sweaty from dancing, her mascara smudged, his tie undone, holding champagne glasses and smiling like they had forever in front of them. He stared at it for a long time, his chest tightening with each breath. He could still hear her voice from that night, soft and almost drunk on laughter as she leaned in and whispered, "I'd never leave you. No matter what. You're my always." Those words felt like a cruel joke now. The same lips that spoke them had kissed another man. The same hands that held his in front of their families had signed off on hotel reservations with someone else. Rage rose in his throat like bile, hot and sour and uncontrollable. But as quickly as it surged, it flattened into something colder. Something heavier. Humiliation. He felt foolish, for not seeing it sooner, for trusting her so blindly, for holding on when she had already let go. He sat down, holding the photo between his fingers, his eyes burning from exhaustion and betrayal. But even beneath the layers of pain, a strange clarity began to take root. It wasn't peace. It wasn't forgiveness. It was purpose. If she wanted freedom, she could have it. But she wasn't going to walk away clean. She'd planned an escape behind his back, erased him from the picture while pretending to be unsure. Fine. Let her go. But not without consequences. Not without the truth finally dragging itself into the light. He set the photo down gently, stood up, and opened his laptop again. It was time to prepare for what came next. The hotel room transformed over the next few hours. What began as a temporary refuge became something colder, sharper, a kind of mission control. Justin rearranged the small table beneath the window, set up his laptop, phone, and secondary tablet. A legal pad filled quickly with bullet points, flowcharts, and timelines, scribbled in tight, deliberate handwriting. Every wire plugged in felt like arming a weapon. He wasn't pacing or spiraling. He was calm. Focused. The same kind of cold, detached focus he'd used in crisis response simulations at work. The difference was, this time, the breach was personal. He mapped out everything he knew: Rachel's affair, the secret bank transfers, the real estate searches. He cataloged the timestamps, pulled backups of every message, email, and file she thought had been deleted. He built folders, encrypted the drive, mirrored everything into a cloud backup only he could access. Every move she'd made, every lie she'd told, was now documented with a level of precision that only a cybersecurity specialist could manage. This wasn't revenge born from chaos, it was control regained through strategy. He opened another browser window and began researching Rachel's company. He pulled internal contacts, HR policies, corporate bylaws. He created anonymous email accounts, each layered with VPN routing and masked identities. He wasn't going to act yet. Not tonight. This wasn't about impulse. It was about timing, about knowing exactly where to strike and how to ensure she couldn't rebuild from the ashes she'd helped create. By midnight, the plan was shaping into something terrifyingly effective. But still, he felt nothing. No satisfaction. No adrenaline rush. Just silence, and the low hum of the laptop fan as he leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, and for a moment, he thought about how easy it had been for Rachel to walk away from everything they built. How carelessly she gambled their life for a man who sent late-night texts and promises he'd never have to keep. Justin closed the laptop gently, his breath steady. She wanted freedom. She was about to get it, in the most brutal, honest way possible. The knock came the next morning, just as Justin was reviewing the timestamps on Rachel's meeting invites and comparing them to hotel check-ins. He opened the door to find Tina standing in the hallway, arms crossed, her face a mixture of worry and fire. She didn't wait to be invited in. "I had a bad feeling," she said, stepping past him. "You didn't answer my texts, and Mom said you weren't at work. What the hell is going on, Justin?" He closed the door and exhaled slowly. "I'm handling it," he said, gesturing to the laptop and open folders on the table. Tina stared at the screen, then at the wall covered in sticky notes and scribbled timelines. "Handling it," she repeated. "This looks like the Pentagon. Are you planning to hack her into exile?" He didn't smile. He just sat down, opened a folder, and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of Rachel's texts, financial statements, hotel records. Tina picked up one page and read in silence, her jaw tightening with each line. When she finally looked up, her voice dropped. "Jesus, Justin. I knew she was acting distant, but this." He nodded once. "She's been lying for months. She built an exit plan, drained our savings, and started playing house with someone else while still wearing my ring." Tina sat across from him, her voice softer now. "So what? You're going to destroy her? Go full digital vigilante?" He met her gaze without blinking. "I'm not ruining her life," he said. "I'm just making her live it honestly." She leaned back, folding her arms. "This could go too far. You don't come back the same from this kind of thing." "I don't want to come back the same," he said, his tone steady. "I was the guy who believed her. Who trusted her. Who took her at her word when she said she needed space. That guy's done. Tina looked at him for a long moment, the weight of her concern unspoken but heavy in the air. Just promise me you're not doing this out of hate, she said. Justin's voice was quiet, but clear. No. Not hate. Clarity. She didn't argue. She simply nodded once, then turned and let herself out, leaving him alone again in a room filled with truth and the quiet hum of justice coming due. 2 days later, when the final pieces were in place and there was nothing left to double-check, Justin knew it was time to act. He waited until early morning, before most of the corporate world had poured its first coffee, and initiated the first phase of his plan. No dramatics, no fireworks, just quiet precision. The kind he'd built a career around. He used a secure, anonymized email server and a disposable identity tied to a fake IP address routed through 3 countries. From that identity, he crafted a message addressed to Rachel's company's HR director, CCING the CFO, and 2 department heads he had identified through LinkedIn and company press releases. The subject line was simple: urgent, ethics violation and financial misconduct, confidential evidence enclosed. Attached were time-stamped screenshots of messages between Rachel and Aaron, some flirtatious, others deeply personal, a few outright explicit. Justin had matched the timestamps to Rachel's calendar invites labeled client lunch and off-site strategy. He included hotel booking receipts charged to her corporate card, with expense reports labeled under vague consulting headers. The smoking gun came in the form of a PDF, an exact copy of a budget file she submitted to accounting, which he had pulled from her sync drive, carefully annotated to show discrepancies between reported expenses and what she was actually spending during these rendezvous. He clicked send. Then he sat back and waited. The fallout came faster than even he anticipated. By noon, his anonymous tip had made its way through the right people. Rachel's badge access was disabled by 2:15. An internal investigator walked her out of her glass-walled office as she stared straight ahead, expression tight, trying to hold on to whatever dignity she had left while coworkers stole glances and whispered. She was not escorted by security, yet, but the message was clear. She was done there. From his hotel room, Justin watched it all unfold in real time. He'd installed silent monitoring tools on her devices, not to manipulate, just to observe. He saw her send a flurry of confused texts to Aaron, followed by panicked emails to HR asking for clarification. He didn't interfere. He didn't need to. The truth was already doing the heavy lifting. She had built her professional reputation on poise, on discretion, on control. And now, that image crumbled within hours, replaced by an HR file marked with internal fraud, misuse of corporate funds, and inappropriate workplace conduct. He knew it wasn't jail time level material, but it would follow her. Blacklist her. Make sure the next time she claimed to be a clean asset to any company, there'd be a red flag waving behind her resume. And as he closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, there was no smile on his face. No joy. Just a slow, steady exhale, as if something heavy had finally been set down. Once the first domino fell, Justin didn't hesitate to push the next. With Rachel's career in freefall, it was only a matter of time before Aaron tried to play damage control, maybe even reframe the situation to protect his own neck. Justin had already anticipated that. He wasn't just after justice, he was after truth, and Aaron had a long trail of it following behind him. He began by assembling a dossier, methodically organizing the screenshots, messages, and emails Rachel had exchanged with Aaron. But this time, he added something else, details from Aaron's past. Justin had spent nights cross-referencing employee records, company newsletters, and forgotten social media posts. 3 different companies in the last 5 years. Each departure quiet, unexplained, but always around the same pattern: brief relationships with female coworkers, inappropriate texts, sudden transfers, and then silence. No public accusations. No HR write-ups that could be traced. But enough breadcrumbs to draw a picture if someone bothered to connect the dots. Justin did. The final package was neat, professional. He sent it to Aaron's new boss using another anonymized email, this time framing it as a concerned former colleague worried about ongoing ethical violations. The body of the email didn't accuse, it asked questions. Are you aware of Aaron's repeated inappropriate relationships with coworkers at previous jobs? Have you reviewed his pattern of behavior across his employment history? If not, you may want to begin with these documents, all verified through public data and internal correspondence. At the same time, he sent a second message, this one personal. Aaron's wife, whom Rachel had referred to once in passing as the jealous type, received a carefully worded note from an anonymous account with an attached folder of screenshots, photos, and hotel confirmations. No commentary. No gloating. Just proof. Undeniable and sharp as glass. By the end of the week, Aaron had gone from rising star to radioactive. He was pulled into HR for an internal review, placed on administrative leave within 24 hours, and removed from client-facing roles. By Friday, his name was no longer on the company website. LinkedIn showed he was seeking new opportunities. Privately, he was trying to patch things up with his wife, but Justin knew from Rachel's incoming texts that she hadn't responded. She had changed the locks, shut down his cards, and told mutual friends she needed space. Aaron didn't just lose his job. He lost his shield, his charm, his ability to skip to the next shiny opportunity. Word traveled fast in their industry, especially when you couldn't control the narrative. And just like that, Aaron was no longer the man Rachel risked everything for. He was just another cautionary tale, burning silently in the wreckage of his own choices. It was Tina who called him that evening, her voice tight with unease. "She's here," she said. "Rachel. She showed up at my apartment an hour ago. She's a mess, Justin." I didn't know what to do. Justin didn't speak right away. He stared at the ceiling of his hotel room, letting the silence hang there. "Is she alone?" he asked finally. "Yeah," Tina replied. "She's crying non-stop. Says she doesn't have anyone else to go to." There was a pause, then her voice dropped. "You should come. Just hear her out." When Justin arrived, he found Rachel sitting on Tina's couch, wrapped in a blanket she probably didn't remember from their college years. Her hair was unkempt, eyes swollen, and she looked smaller than he remembered, as if everything she'd built around herself had collapsed, and now all that remained was the raw, unfiltered version of the woman he once loved. She didn't get up when he walked in. Just looked at him, like she was bracing for impact. "You didn't return my calls," she said softly, her voice hoarse. "I know I don't deserve you to. But I had to try." Tina excused herself quietly, leaving them alone in the dim room. Rachel took a breath. "Aaron's gone. He blocked me after the HR fallout. Said I was toxic and dragging him down. My job's over. They escorted me out like a criminal. I can't access my company accounts. People won't even return my emails. I've lost everything." Justin didn't flinch. He didn't move. He simply watched her as she unraveled in front of him. "You didn't lose it," he said evenly. "You gave it away." She wiped her face, hands trembling. "I was stupid. I was selfish. I let attention go to my head, and I broke everything that mattered. You. Us. I don't even know who I am anymore." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, Justin saw a flash of the woman he used to come home to, the one who hummed while folding laundry, who danced barefoot in the kitchen with a glass of wine. But the image flickered and faded. What stood before him now was someone else. Someone who only looked back because everything she ran toward had disappeared. Still, he didn't offer comfort. "Not yet." "Why are you here, Rachel?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "Because you were the only real thing in my life. And I didn't realize it until it was too late." This time, Justin didn't look away. "You're right," he said. "It is too late." The room felt like it was holding its breath, the silence stretched tight between them. Rachel looked at him, searching for something in his expression, mercy, maybe, or some sign that a part of him still wanted to fix what had shattered. But Justin wasn't the man she remembered, not anymore. Whatever softness he once carried for her had been hardened by nights of quiet betrayal and the slow unraveling of everything they'd promised each other. He sat forward slightly, his voice steady, not angry, not cruel, just final. "You didn't lose me, Rachel," he said. "You threw me away." The words hit her harder than anything he could have yelled. Her breath caught as if something inside her snapped. She shook her head, tears falling fast now, mouth open but unable to form a reply. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "I thought I was just confused." You didn't think I'd find out," he interrupted quietly. "Or maybe you did. Maybe part of you wanted me to. So you wouldn't have to be the one to walk away." She flinched, and he knew he was right. Her silence wasn't innocence, it was confirmation. She stood abruptly, arms wrapping around herself, as if she could hold her regrets together. "Please, Justin," she said through sobs. "Please don't let this be how it ends." He rose from his chair and looked at her, really looked at her, this woman who had once held his hand during hospital stays, who knew how he took his coffee and what song calmed him when he couldn't sleep. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who gambled everything for a fantasy and came crawling back only after it collapsed. "This isn't how it ends, Rachel," he said. "It ended the moment you made a choice and expected me to wait around until you decided what I was worth." She tried to step closer, but he took a measured step back. "Don't," he said, not harshly, but with a firmness she couldn't argue with. Her shoulders dropped, and the last bit of hope drained from her face. With nothing left to say, Justin turned and walked to the door. He didn't look back. As the door closed behind him, her sobs echoed down the hallway, but they didn't follow him. Not anymore. He wasn't hers to cry for. Not after everything. Outside, the air was cold and clean, and for the first time in months, Justin felt like he could finally breathe. 6 months passed, not quickly, not quietly, but steadily, like healing tends to do when you stop resisting it. Justin had moved into a new condo on the west side of Denver, a modest space with clean lines, sunlight pouring in through tall windows, and not a single memory tied to Rachel. There were no framed wedding photos to take down, no couch with old coffee stains that whispered about shared Sunday mornings. Everything here was his, chosen with intention, free of ghosts. His mornings had a rhythm now. He woke early, ran along the river trail, and hit the gym before work. The physical strain gave him something he hadn't realized he was missing, a way to burn through the residual anger that still lived under his skin. In the evenings, he started going to therapy. At first, it felt unnecessary, like a box to check. But slowly, session by session, he began unpacking not just the betrayal, but the ways he'd allowed himself to shrink in that marriage, how he'd ignored red flags, buried discomfort, and handed over pieces of himself in the name of compromise. He also began journaling. Nothing poetic, just raw honesty. Some days it was a paragraph, other times pages poured out. He wrote about pain, about resilience, about things he never admitted out loud. Somewhere between the ink and silence, he started to make peace with it all. Not forgiveness, not yet. But acceptance. A quiet understanding that some people you love will break you, not because they mean to, but because they don't know how to hold anything gently. The condo stayed quiet most nights, and that silence, once suffocating, had become comforting. It was the sound of space being made, space to grow, to reflect, to rediscover who he was without the weight of someone else's indecision hanging over him. He didn't need chaos to feel alive anymore. He didn't need closure from Rachel. He had given that to himself. In the stillness of his new life, Justin found something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, not loud or showy, but real, steady, and entirely his own. On a crisp Saturday morning in late spring, Tina dropped by unannounced, holding 2 coffees and a small bag of pastries from their favorite bakery. Justin let her in with a quiet smile, and the two of them settled on the balcony, the city humming softly beneath them. They didn't talk much at first, just listened to the wind and watched the sunlight bounce off distant windows. Tina took a sip of her coffee, then glanced at him sideways. "So," she said finally, "was it worth it?" Justin didn't answer right away. He sat back in his chair, the mug warm in his hands, eyes tracing the horizon. "I thought I'd feel different," he said slowly. "I thought once it was all over, once she lost everything, once I walked away, I'd feel something. Relief. Satisfaction. Closure. But I don't. I don't feel anything at all." Tina studied him for a moment, brow furrowed, not with judgment, but with that quiet empathy only siblings seem to master. "Maybe that's the point," she said softly. "Maybe it's not about feeling something. Maybe it's about finally not feeling the weight of everything she put you through." He nodded a little, then looked down into his coffee. "I spent so long waiting to feel right again. I thought revenge would fix the part of me that broke. But it didn't. It just cleared the wreckage. The rest is still up to me." Tina reached over and touched his arm gently. "That's healing, Justin. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with mornings like this. Quiet, simple, honest." They sat like that for a while, letting the silence do the talking. He didn't regret what he'd done, not really. Rachel had made her choices. He'd just made sure the consequences arrived. But now, finally, the rage that once sat like a furnace in his chest had cooled to embers. And in its place was something he couldn't quite name yet, but it felt like the beginning of something better. Something whole. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched across the hardwood floor of his quiet condo, Justin sat alone at his desk, flipping through pages of his journal. He paused on an older entry, one written the night he'd decided to push the first domino. The handwriting was tighter, more urgent, brimming with the sharp edge of betrayal. He traced the lines with his finger, remembering the cold resolve in his chest as he planned every step. Then he picked up his pen and wrote something new. "Some say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what they don't tell you is how cold you become in the process. It doesn't just take from them, it takes from you, too. I became precise, methodical, ruthless, and in doing so, I lost something soft. Something good. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I calculated, executed, and dismantled a person I once would have bled for. I didn't lose sleep after. I didn't second-guess myself. But I didn't feel victory either. Just stillness. The quiet kind that makes you wonder if, in trying to protect what's left of your soul, you built a wall too thick for anything to reach you again. Maybe that's the price. Maybe that's justice. Or maybe it's just the long road back to being human again. Now it's your turn to weigh in. If someone betrayed your love and loyalty like Rachel did to Justin, if they planned a life behind your back while still holding your hand, what would you do? Would you burn it all down to the ground like he did? Would you make them feel every ounce of pain they put you through? Or would you walk away with your peace intact, even if it left you feeling hollow? It's not a question with a right answer, but it's one worth asking. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own story if you've lived through something similar. There's a whole community here who knows what that kind of silence feels like. And if you've made it this far, remember this: revenge might give you closure, but only healing gives you peace. Just because someone broke you doesn't mean you have to stay broken. Some endings aren't about destruction, they're about making room for something new. Something real. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is survive with your soul still intact.